The Miami Hurricanes have plugged some important holes with experienced players. So, who will be the top 5 most impactful transfers in 2024?
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday, if there is such a thing. I am Alex Donno. I'm a University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet, and contributor to allhurricanes.com. And thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen. We are free wherever you get your podcasts. We're available free on YouTube. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. All right, before I give you guys my power ranking of who are going to be the top 5 most impactful transfers in order for Miami in the 2024 season, the guys who will make the biggest impact this year, if it's not self-explanatory enough for you, I want to talk about a transfer that is still undecided. Someone that Miami just hosted this past weekend. I'm sure they were hoping to get a commitment in the room. That didn't happen. So now they're going to have to fight off Ole Miss. I'm talking about Nate Kalepo, the starting left guard for the Washington Huskies this past year. Guy that started every game for a team that happened to boast the best offensive line in college football. The Washington Huskies won the coveted Joe Moore Award, which is given out to the most outstanding O-line unit in the entire country. So this is a sought-after player. Now, if Miami were to be able to add Kalepo, this is obviously a luxury pickup. I do believe he is an upgrade at that position, would be the virtually automatic replacement for Javion Cohen, who's on to the NFL. I do think Miami can still have an excellent offensive line without Kalepo. But by all accounts, so he had, as we documented here on this show, he had a 2-day visit in Miami, a multi-day visit, Saturday into Sunday. And from everything I've heard, Miami felt like it was a good visit. They did everything that they could, from a football standpoint, from the standpoint of showing him the campus and showing him the area. South Florida, as we know, is a nice place to be. Kalepo's visit seemed to go into the evening yesterday, Sunday. So he must have caught a late flight or a red-eye type situation out to Mississippi. He was apparently at dinner at Smith & Wollensky Steakhouse, nice spot, with some Miami players last night, some Miami offensive linemen who were hosting him on his visit. And folks, as a side note, I can only imagine what that tab looked like. You take several offensive linemen out to a steakhouse. These guys are probably ordering 8 sides apiece. They're ordering multiple entrees. I can't even imagine what that tab looked like, but hopefully that was a good time. And yes, of course, as these things always go, Miami, I believe, wanted him to commit to the U immediately and not take another visit, right? So he goes off to Ole Miss after this visit. This gives the Rebels and Lane Kiffin, this gives them an opportunity to get into the driver's seat here. His visit is starting today at Ole Miss. So Kalepo, and I can understand this, he wants to evaluate multiple options before making a decision, and he wants to compare Miami and Ole Miss to one another. As mentioned, this guy was the starting left guard for Washington last year, gave up just 1 sack all year. Obviously, it's going to be tough for Miami since he's making that Ole Miss visit. It's going to be tough to beat out a prominent SEC program. Ole Miss, very competitive in the NIL landscape. And Lane Kiffin is always super active in the transfer portal. Out in Mississippi, they call him the Portal King. I know in the panhandle of Florida, they call Mike Norvell the Portal King. Just for reference, even before Kalepo potentially commits there, Ole Miss has the number 1 transfer portal class in the country right now. Florida State has the number 3 class. So both of those teams have been very active in that regard. But yeah, listen, Ole Miss is going to be tough to beat out, especially since he is making the visit there after leaving Miami. But from a Miami standpoint, folks, let's not forget, Kalepo surely sees the track record from a player development standpoint of what Alex Mirabal and Mario Cristobal can do for the development of offensive linemen, even if you're only with these guys for 1 year. Javion Cohen was an amazing case study This guy was already really good when he left Alabama, which is a great program at every position, including offensive line. Javion Cohen comes Miami for 1 year, and they're still able to significantly raise his draft stock and raise his level of play and his techniques in just 1 season at Miami. So, from a personal development standpoint, because I'm sure Nate Kalepo has aspirations of getting into the NFL and being a high draft pick, a little over a year from now, you can look at Miami, and that's a place that's going to help me even take my technique to the next level. Because say what you want to say about Cristobal and Miami's coaching staff, from a development of offensive line standpoint, Miami now, Oregon previously, that's one of those places you go as an O-lineman to develop. And also, from a team standpoint, not to say this isn't the case for Ole Miss, but from a team standpoint, Miami is expected to be really competitive within the ACC next year, which could make them competitive on the national scene. So, obviously the lights are very bright in the SEC. I get that. So that's going to be what we're looking at right now, competing with Ole Miss for Nate Kalepo. Advantage Ole Miss right now that they're apparently going to get that last visit. And also, the clock is ticking. I'm not sure what Ole Miss's enrollment deadlines are. Forgive me in not being well-versed in that. But from a Miami standpoint, if Kalepo is looking to join a team immediately and be eligible to play spring football, we are now 2 days away from the deadline at Miami. The last drop dead date to be able to enroll for spring classes, which you have to do to play spring football, January 24th. So if he wants to be in Miami, that could still technically happen. He could join the team after the spring, but if he wants to be here or anywhere in time for spring practice, that decision has to be made within the next couple of days. But I'll say this multiple times, my friends. Miami can still have an excellent offensive line, whether they add Nate Kalepo or not, okay? And this is not my way of coping. This is just I'd love to have Kalepo here. But if Kalepo doesn't come, Matthew McCoy would be my top option to start at left guard. And I know the coaching staff believes in him. I think he could be great there. With Jalen Rivers probably sticking at left tackle where he was really good last year. Now, if needed, for whatever reason, if somebody else maybe is a better option on the outside, Jalen Rivers is capable of playing left guard at a high level. That would involve shuffling multiple people, though. Tommy Kinsler, I imagine, would be another option at left guard. He's mostly played on the right side, but Mirabal cross-trains guys all over the field on the offensive line, so I think he could fill that hole if needed. But if Miami is able to get Kalepo, that's a luxury addition. This guy would have the pedigree and experience to somewhat seamlessly replace Javion Cohen. I don't necessarily think he's as good as Javion Cohen, but that would be the smoothest possible transition you could make. The same way that I expect the transition from Matt Lee, who I loved, to Zach Carpenter, who comes in with all that experience at Indiana at center. I expect that to be a pretty smooth, seamless transition. Kalepo would offer the same kind of transition going from Javion Cohen to him. Otherwise, there's just a few more question marks there. All right, my friends, it's going to be a fun episode here of Locked on Canes, and we're only getting started. When we come back, I will give you, Miami has added 10 transfers so far in the portal. I'm going to give you my top 5 most impactful in order. I'm going to give you my power ranking of the guys, and number 1 might be kind of obvious. I'm just spoiler alert, but I'm going to give you my top 5 in order, who I expect to be the most impactful Miami Hurricanes transfer players next year. You know what you want to do? You want to keep it locked right here on this brand new episode of Locked on Canes. And I know you're keeping it locked to FanDuel. Folks, we got the conference championships coming up. We got that big game coming up in the NFL. We have all the college basketball action, all the hockey, all the NBA. Oh, there's so much going on, and it's not too late to get in on all the action at FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose that first bet. The app is so easy to use. There's so many different ways to bet, like live same-game parlays. Find bets in the new Explore tab. Make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, which is the best way to find popular parlays. So much more. Guys, I love the props and the player props. And obviously, once we get closer to that Super Bowl, we're going to be looking at props left and right, national anthem, coin toss, what outfit or the halftime performer is going to be wearing. There's going to be so much to look at and so much fun to be had at FanDuel. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make that first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Thank you so much for making this Monday episode of Locked On Canes your first listen. We're available free wherever you get your pods. We're available free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Guys, make sure you make Locked On Sports Today your second listen. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. And it really is awesome. All right, my friends. So I'm looking at Miami's transfer portal class so far. Let me give you all the names, and then I'll give you my top 5 in terms of impact. Miami has added defensive tackle Marley Cook from Middle Tennessee. They've added center Zach Carpenter from Indiana. They've added defensive tackle C.J. Clark from NC State. They've added safety Savion Riley from Vanderbilt. They've added safety Isaiah Taylor, Jason Taylor's son from Arizona. Our understanding is he's a preferred walk-on. Same thing with Rodney Hill, running back Rodney Hill from Florida State, preferred walk-on. Defensive end Elijah Alston out of Marshall, played under Lance Guidry before. Quarterback Reese Poffenbarger out of Albany. Mishael Powell, safety from Washington, and Cameron Ward, as it says on his driver's license, is the big quarterback addition. So here's my top 5 in guys who, and this is not necessarily, in some cases, absolutely, but not necessarily me saying these are the top 5 overall players, but these are the top 5 guys in order who I believe will have the biggest impacts on the field in 2024. Some of these guys are one and dones, grad transfers. Some of these guys have multiple years. So for some of them, they may have an opportunity to make a bigger impact in 2025 or 2026 and so on. But number 1 for me, the guy who I think is going to have the biggest impact on the field in the 2024 season is Cam Ward. Miami managed to upgrade from last season, I strongly believe. Some of you are like, Donno, are you sure that this guy's better than Tyler Van Dyke? I don't know why you got to be. I think we saw enough from Tyler. I wish him the best, but I don't think we needed to remix that for another year. I absolutely believe Cam Ward is an upgrade from last season in what happens to be the most important position on the field. Guy who touches the football on every offensive play. Cam Ward is capable of making every throw. He can extend plays with his athleticism from the perspective of an offensive play caller, because we've talked about this a lot in terms of what he's going to mean to Shannon Dawson. So from Dawson's perspective, you now have a quarterback that doesn't give you any limitations on paper. I know that he's not perfect. He's had some fumbling issues, but in terms of what you can call on third down, you get no limitations from Cam Ward. He also comes in with loads of experience, someone who's been a starter at the quarterback position for the past 4 seasons, throws really good 50-50 balls, accurate deep balls. I think Cam Ward has the opportunity to be electric, and yes, I do expect him to be the most impactful transfer out of the ones that Miami has added. He is number 1. Gets a little tougher once we go beyond number 1. I had some debates here. I debated a couple of different guys for number 2, but I'm going at number 2 with Mishael Powell. Mees Powell, I think he goes by Mees, the Washington safety. He comes in again, loads of experience, and he can help Miami stabilize the defensive backfield because they had tough losses there. You lost both Cam Kinchins, who was the heart and soul of that defense, James Williams, another excellent player. You lost both of those guys to the NFL. Mees Powell started every game on a team that just came in second place for a national championship. He played pretty well in that championship game. So, Miami does, beyond Mees, they've got some quality youth in their safety room, but now having a veteran with all this high-level experience to help mentor that group and more than likely lock down a starting job, because, heck, I wouldn't have him at number 2 if I didn't expect Mees Powell to be a starter here. To be able to bring this guy in, it's a really, really important job Miami did of addressing needs at safety. I think Powell is going to be very impactful. So, at number 3, and I debated whether this guy was number 2 or number 3. I think I got it right at the end of the day. We'll find out. I'm going with Zach Carpenter, the Indiana transfer center. He's my 3rd. Carpenter, big shoes to fill, as we know, because Matt Lee, who was a transfer last year out of UCF, had an excellent year at center, some of the best grades in the country at his position. So Carpenter has big shoes to fill, but Zach Carpenter, solid starter in the Big Ten at Indiana. He was by far Miami's best option in the portal to replace Lee. So hopefully Carpenter is doing some of the same things. I mean, he's on campus now the same way when Matt Lee got to Miami, very quickly acclimated himself with his teammates, built a good relationship with his quarterback, Tyler Van Dyke. Hopefully Zach Carpenter and Cam Ward are already building that type of relationship. And, because I think this is an excellent player who could end up doing a pretty bang-up job filling some big shoes that Matt Lee leaves behind. Number 4 for me, fourth most impactful transfer Miami has added, CJ Clark. This guy is a former, going to be here as well, but he was a solid starting defensive tackle at NC State, which had one of the better defenses in the country, top 3 defense in the ACC last year. And this guy should be a solid replacement for Leonard Taylor. I don't think CJ Clark has as much upside as Leonard Taylor has, but hopefully CJ Clark can play with a bit more consistency, because that was the one area that frustrated us about Leonard Taylor. Was some games he was all world, other games not as much. And with Clark, do not sleep on this acquisition, because another thing that I love about CJ Clark is his familiarity with the ACC. He's been in the ACC for the past 4 years. He's played against all these opponents. He understands what it means, because, for some players coming into a new conference, there's a bit of an adjustment period. There's no adjustment period necessary for CJ Clark. He knows this conference. I value that. Okay. He's my number 4. My number 5, and this was another debate. Like I was kind of deciding, should this guy be number 4? Should he be number 5? But rounding out my power ranking of top 5 most impactful transfers this coming season at the University of Miami, I go with Elijah Alston, someone we haven't covered enough on Locked On Canes because I happened to be on vacation when he arrived at Miami. But Elijah Alston, edge rusher out of Marshall, excellent pickup, especially since we thought we lost this guy to Texas A&M. He had committed to Texas A&M, decommitted, ends up at Miami. Elijah Alston, 11.5 tackles for loss last year, had one of the highest pass rushing grades in America at 90.5 per Pro Football Focus. And when we talk about familiarity, he has familiarity with his defensive coordinator. He knows exactly what to expect from Lance Guidry, having played for him at Marshall. So I think Elijah Alston was an excellent pickup. That's my top 5. Alston at number 5, defensive tackle CJ Clark at number 4, center Zach Carpenter at 3, safety Mishael Powell at number 2, and quarterback Cam Ward at number 1. That is my top 5 power ranking, most impactful transfers for Miami this year. Now, someone who didn't make my top 5, and I might have been, I might have downplayed it a little bit too much. We did an episode for this guy on Saturday when he announced he was committing to Miami. And some people thought I overvalue him. A lot of people thought I undervalue him. But I do want to take another look at Rodney Hill. So Rodney Hill, former Florida State running back, who had announced he was going to FAMU, and then he ends up at Miami. He announced that on Saturday. And I know Miami fans weren't overly excited to land a running back because there's already a lot in that running back room at Miami. I think plus the fact that he had previously committed to FAMU had made people think that this wasn't such a big deal. But let me say a couple things about Rodney Hill. I want to give this man some credit. For Miami, being able to add a talented player with ACC experience as a preferred walk-on, he's not taking up a scholarship. That's a great move by Miami. Rodney Hill, in his time at Florida State, I know the Florida State fans are all like, why is Miami adding our leftovers? Ha, ha, ha. They're laughing at us now. You can pull a lot of tweets from those same Florida State fans who were really high on Rodney Hill when he was there. I'm just saying, they were really high on the guy when he was there. Now they've turned their back on Rodney Hill now that he's gone. He has showed during his time at Florida State, Hill showed excellent field vision, a really good ability to elude tackles. He was productive as their 3rd or 4th running back. I think the role he's going to play at Miami could be valuable at Miami from a situational standpoint, and he can also play special teams. I didn't emphasize that enough the other day. And guys, keep in mind, no matter how deep the last couple of years, no matter how deep Miami's running back room has looked, injuries seem to pop up a lot at that position. So being now 5 or 6 deep in your rotation is a great luxury to have. And that's the difference. Teams that contend for championships versus teams that don't. The teams that contend are usually the ones that have beyond 2 to 3 deep at every position. And that's what Miami is striving for. I believe they now have that at the running back position. My friends, when we come back, I'm going to go rapid fire. I'm going to turn it over to you guys' questions because you've been active on the Locked On Canes Insiders chat. How do you join the Locked On Canes Insiders chat? Thank you for asking. I'll tell you. You click the link in the show description below. Click the link below to join Locked On Canes Insiders. You get text messages directly from my phone to yours with breaking news, show topics, transfer portal scoops, recruiting scoops, one-on-ones. You can ask me questions on there. You can try it free for 14 days. Click the link for Locked On Canes Insiders below. Try it free for 14 days. Then if you like it, after 2 weeks, you can opt in for $4.99 a month, and you get a lot of added value on there when you become a Locked On Canes Insider. So you guys, you've been asking me a lot of questions about the scholarship count because Miami is over the 85 right now. They don't have to get 85 or below until August, but Miami is over 85 right now. You guys have a lot of questions on that, on how do you nudge players out? Like, how does that work? People are curious about that. We also got a really good question. This dude's making me do homework on what I expect to be Miami's starting lineup on offense and defense when they face the Florida Gators August 31st. And because I love a challenge, I will answer the question in full. So, folks, you want to keep it locked right here. We're not done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Thank you for making Locked On Canes your first listen and your first watch. We are free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. I love the everydayers. You guys are awesome. By the way, guys, make sure after you watch Locked On Canes and after you check out Locked On Sports Today, check out the brand new show, Locked On College Football. I've already been a guest on that show. The show's been going for a week. I've already been on it. Spencer McLaughlin does an excellent job every single day covering all the big stories throughout the sport, Locked On College Football. I want to throw a shout out to one of our awesome listeners who has a birthday today. Happy birthday to Luis Docampo. I don't know how old you are. I don't care. You look, you're probably 25 years young. Luis Docampo, happy birthday. I hope you celebrate. And, I don't know, maybe Miami will have some kind of good news for you today. So happy birthday to Luis. We appreciate you being an awesome listener and an awesome supporter of this show. We get a question from Quan McCain who says, I want you, being me, to predict Miami's starting 22 players for the game against Florida. That'll be week 0, August 31st at the Swamp. All right, I'm going to take a stab at this. And you guys, by the way, these are just my opinion. So if you guys disagree on who are going to be the starters against Florida, let me know in the comments. If I got anything, I know at least one of these you're not going to like. But let me know in the comments what I got wrong, who you expect to start. Miami's starting quarterback against Florida, that's going to be Cam Ward, right? Let's go wide receivers. Xavier Restrepo, Jacoby George, and I believe Isaiah Horton will be the other starter receiver. Obviously, that's going to be dependent on if Miami adds another receiver in the transfer portal. Even if they do, Horton, having already been here, might have a bit of an advantage. So I'm going to predict Isaiah Horton will be the third starter at receiver. This is the one some of you aren't going to like, but I just have this feeling that Cam McCormick is going to be the week 0 starter at tight end. I don't necessarily think he's going to lock down that starting job all year. So I could see McCormick maybe by week 2 or week 3 getting passed over because Miami's got a lot of talent in that room. Elijah Arroyo, I don't know how healthy he is. Riley Williams, I think is going to be a big riser this year. He played a lot last year. Elijah Lofton, a true freshman. I don't think he's going to play as much. Jackson Carver, I don't expect him to be in the running to start the first week. So I just got this weird feeling Cam McCormick is going to be the starter for the first game, but not necessarily much beyond that. Offensive line, I've already kind of hinted at this one a little bit, but offensive line, I expect Jalen Rivers, left tackle, Matthew McCoy, left guard, assuming Miami doesn't land Kalepo, Zach Carpenter, center, Inez Cooper, right guard, Francis Maui-Noah at right tackle. I expect Mark Fletcher to be the opening day starter at running back. I know he's coming off an injury. I don't think it's as serious as some fans believed or feared it to be. I hope I'm right about that. But, Mark Fletcher, fully healthy. He's the best running back on Miami's roster. I expect him to be healthy, and I expect him to start in that game. Let's go with the defense. On the defensive line, this was a tough one because I debated between Akeem Mesidor and Elijah Alston because Akeem fought through it. He had a season-ending injury last year. I think if Akeem Mesidor is healthy, I think he's gonna earn a starting job. So I'm gonna go Akeem Mesidor and Reuben Bain on the edges, and I go C.J. Clark and Jared Harrison Hunt in the interior. I wonder if Marley Cook could earn a job over somebody, but Harrison Hunt is so experienced. C.J. Clark so experienced. I think those will be the starters on the D-line. Linebacker, easy. Kiko Maui-Noa, West Passaic. Star position, I think it might be Damari Brown. Hopefully Florida State doesn't, tamper like crazy and try to get him to join his brother in the spring. I think Damari is going to stay at Miami. I think he's going to be a starter. Cornerbacks, I'm going to go Daryl Porter Jr. and Jadis Richard. Safeties, I'm going to go Mees Powell, and the other one's tough. Maybe Savion Riley coming in from Vanderbilt. I feel like he could earn one of the starting jobs there. That's going to be my official prediction. Of course, I reserve the right to revisit these after spring football and during fall camp because, usually the predictions we make like 7-8 months before the first game are, we'll see how accurate or inaccurate I am once August 31st rolls around. We get a question from Explorer Sam, who says, we seem to have more players than scholarships. When will the tough decisions be made as to who stays and who goes? Yeah, all the estimates are unofficial because Miami doesn't have to tell us exactly how many guys they have on scholarship right now. So these are just estimates. Miami, I think, is about 10 or 11 players over the 85 right now, and they can be over until August, okay? The tough decisions, most of them will be made after spring football. Some of them might be made into the summer, but I think after spring football, which ends on April 14th or April 13th, I think April 13th is Miami's spring game. Right after that is when you're going to start having these conversations and these decisions as to who has a future at Miami and who doesn't and who needs to move on. So there's going to be a lot of that happening after the spring game. That's when it's going to be. We get a question. I don't think this person signed their question, but they say, with the team being over on scholarships, do they just take the scholarships away from players or are they told to transfer? Here's my best understanding of the process. Especially when you've got a head coach like Mario Cristobal, who honesty and transparency, he holds those things in high regard. They're going to have meetings with coaches. They're going to have meetings with the head coach. They're going to have meetings with their position coaches and their coordinators. They're going to be as upfront and as frank with these players as possible. Some of these players will decide on their own, hey, I'm probably not going to play here. I want to find somewhere where I can play because getting on the field is really important to most guys, obviously. Other players, the coaching staff may have to nudge them and give them some harsh truths. And one of the things that I really like about the way Miami does this is, when they have to kind of maybe encourage players to find another place to play, they usually help and facilitate that process. I think it was Vincent Shavers, who was a former Miami commit, who ended up at Nebraska. Miami helped him find that new destination before National Signing Day. So they like to do right by these players and help them out. But yeah, they usually don't just say, oh, by the way, you've been cut, you're no longer on the team. They usually have meetings and they kind of explain the situation. And they try to help these players find the best possible landing spots. And listen, some of the guys who are going to leave may not be players the coaches want to leave, right? Some of the guys who leave may be guys we're hoping to keep, but they decide, hey, there's maybe too much competition at my position. I want to find somewhere else to play. So that's going to happen as well. It's a two-way street. We get a question from Grace, who says, hey, do you think Miami has a real shot at an ACC championship this year with our current roster? After adding Cam Ward, yes. Miami has no excuses not to compete for an ACC championship, in my opinion. I'll give you an example on how, Miami's roster, there's a lot to like about it on paper, okay? I received this message from Brandon Olson at Locked On Gators because obviously Miami plays Florida first game. So Brandon is doing kind of a deep dive on Miami's roster. He told me, hey, I did my annual 5 building blocks show that I do every year. But I was talking about UF's opponents for 2024, and he says Miami is the only team on UF's schedule with a guy at all 5 spots. Here's his criteria. He says his theory is if you have a legitimately good player at quarterback, pass catcher, offensive tackle, pass rusher, and outside cornerback, then you can look at that as a solid roster, he says. So, if I'm going to read between the lines here, obviously quarterback would be Cam Ward. Offensive tackle, Miami's got a couple of them. I mean, Jalen Rivers and Maui Noah. And, Pancake Honcho, we'll see how much he gets on the field this year. He's probably going to be like your second team left tackle, probably. Pass rusher, Miami's got some good ones, especially Ruben Bain. Outside cornerback, Daryl Porter, the experienced guy coming back. So he looked, and Restrepo at pass catcher, he says he looks at that as a solid roster. So again, no excuse why Miami should not compete. We get a question from Maryland Kane, who says, hey, is it typical for teams to recruit over the scholarship limit to maximize and then trim the number down? Maryland Kane, I think, yes, that's become very common now in the era of the transfer portal. Like if you expect to have a really deep roster, you have to over scholarship until it's time to get down to 85. And the reason why you have to do that is it's a little bit unpredictable how many guys are going to decide to leave your roster. So you have to be this time. Now, Miami's really got a lot of extra guys right now, but I think you really have to be well over 85 this time of year because there's another transfer portal opening in April. You can't exactly predict who's going to leave. So it's become very common in the transfer portal era. It's become very common to have over the scholarship limit this time of year. I don't necessarily think that was so common 4, 5, 6 years ago, but it's really become common today. All right, so any questions we haven't been able to answer yet? I know we got some good ones from Kane across the alley and from Salty Warrior. We will get to those later this week, my friends. By the way, tomorrow's show is going to be epic. How many times have we talked about Booker Pickett Jr. dominating these high school all-star games? Booker Pickett Sr., his father and former Miami Hurricane, is going to be joining us tomorrow. Bruce Warner is bringing Booker Pickett Sr. on the show tomorrow. That's going to be awesome. Make sure you check it out on another episode. Oops, hold on. I hit the wrong thing. Another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.